In December 1964, Ray Davies said something quite unusual for a pop songwriter at the time. He said that songs about boy meets girl were already starting to feel outdated, and that something else would have to replace them. Now that's a strange thing to hear in 1964, because that's exactly what most pop music was built on. But over the next year, that's exactly what the Kinks started to move away from. And one of the first places you can really hear that change is on an album that most people don't talk about. By the end of 1965, the Kinks were in a difficult position. They'd had major hits, You Really Got Me, All Day and All of the Night, Till the End of the Day, but behind the scenes, things weren't quite as stable. There were tensions within the band, problems with management and publishing, and the constant cycle of touring, recording and promotion. And by this point, things are already starting to go wrong, especially in America. After a chaotic US tour earlier that year, they're effectively banned from returning for the next few years. At the same time, Ray Davies was starting to think differently about songwriting, not just writing hits, but writing something more. And you can hear that change happening before this album even comes out, on the Quiet Kinks EP, and especially on A Well-Respected Man.
Is a well-respected man about town.
Suddenly, the focus isn't on romance at all. He's writing about people instead, and that changes everything. Interestingly, A Well-Respected Man actually found a bigger audience in America, where it was released as a single and picked up significant airplay. At the same time, they're putting out singles like Till the End of the Day, which still carry the energy of their earlier singles. So you've got this moment where the Kinks are doing two things at once. They're still a hit singles band, but they're starting to become something else. And that brings us to the Kink Kontroversy, which was released on November the 26th, 1965. Now on the surface, this can sound just like another early Kinks album. But when you look a bit closer, there are some important differences. The earlier albums had been put together very quickly, rushed even. But here, things feel tighter and a bit more controlled. And musically, you can hear Ray starting to push things a bit further. It's still rooted in that earlier R&B sound, but the songwriting is starting to change. Songs like The World Keeps Going Round are far more introspective. I'm on an Island has a completely different feel, almost detached, observational. And Where Have All the Good Times Gone sits right between the two. What's especially interesting is how this album was received at the time. In America, it was released the following year, but again, it wasn't a major breakthrough. At the same time, the momentum they'd built up starts to slow, and this is where the album becomes interesting. Because if you go back to that 1964 interview, Ray wasn't just reacting to changes in music, he was anticipating them. He talks about wanting to move beyond those simple themes, and even says he doesn't want to just stay at the top and repeat the same thing. That's not how most pop artists were thinking at the time. And that's the key, because once that door opens, everything that follows starts to make more sense. Most people point to Face to Face as the moment everything really changes, but you can actually hear that shift starting a little earlier, right here. So although Kink Kontroversy isn't their most famous album, and to be fair, it probably isn't their best either, it might be one of the most important. Because this is where the Kinks begin to move away from being a straightforward hit singles band and start becoming something much more distinctive. So this album sits right in the middle of that change. Not quite early Kinks, not quite later Kinks, but the point where things start to turn. And once you hear it that way, it becomes a much more interesting record. If you'd like to go deeper into this period, you'd be well served by Andrew Sandoval and Doug Hinman's fabulous book, The Kinks, The Day-by-Day Story. It goes into incredible detail on the band's recording sessions, releases, and day-to-day activity from their beginnings up to 1971. I'll leave a link in the description if you'd like to check it out, and if you do, you can get a $15 discount using the code Parlogram15. I'd be interested to know what you think about this one. Do you hear it as a turning point, or does that start later? Let me know in the comments. For the next video in this series, we'll move on to the album where that change really comes into focus, Face to Face. But that's all for this one, so I'll say bye for now, and thanks for watching.